You're listening to the ShireFit podcast. This series, Max and Jonny explore how to become the master of your mindset.
Hi team, we are back with the ShireFit podcast. I'm a little bit nervous. Jonny can tell he's just asked me to chill out a little bit. If you haven't worked out already, Jonny Landales is the new ShireFit podcast host. That's it. Tara would have loved to have been here, but she's obviously a very busy girl at the moment with everything that's going on in North Leeds.
Manager S now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Jonny has stepped up into the plate.
Happy to.
Although he's kind of failed his first part of the job because he just informed me he doesn't know how to use the mic, even though he's a professional singer, and the PA system.
PA system's beyond me. Microphones are one thing. To be fair, I held it the right way around first time.
True, that is true, which is better than me and Tara did. So, the podcast guys is back, and we're going to do them very differently to how we did the last time. So, the first thing that we're going to change is the format in terms of episode to episode. So, what we're going to do this time is a series, a block of mindset podcasts, somewhere between 6 and 8 episodes. We're going to cover everything to do with mindset. We're going to cover different topics every week, and that's going to be the focus for this next series. And then we'll shift that direction to something different. The series following will be about movement, and we'll keep shifting the focus so we can really dive into topics rather than just touching the surface and then moving back out again. The second thing that's changed about the podcast is the actual format within each podcast. So we're going to, this is a little bit cheesy, a little bit CrossFit, but I kind of stole this from Ben Bergeron's Chasing Excellence podcast. I thought it was quite nice and also a good way for our members to relate to the podcast. We're going to do it in a similar format to our classes. So there'll be a warm-up, which will consist of a listener's question that we'll gather on the social media. There'll be a strength section where we will give our take on a popular fitness concept. So me and Jonny will argue it out, battle it out on some popular fitness concepts. And then we're going to finish with the workout, which will be our mindset topic. So today, just to give you a quick summary, we have a listener question from Bryony about injuries. We've got the strength section is about our take on the popular perception that you have to smash yourself every single time you enter the gym. And then the workout is on how to overcome lift anxiety. So we're going to start with our listener question, which is from Bryony, which was, do you think injury can aid an athlete's overall progression?
Yes, I do.
Done. Move on.
In summary, yes. And I think it's good that this is part of the mindset because it definitely massively matters how you approach your injury, because you've got two ways. You've got one, this sucks, what's the point? I might as well not bother because I was doing so well, woe is me and all that jazz. And there's nothing wrong with having a moment where you spit your dummy out and, you're upset, because it is a frustrating thing. What you then have to do is realise from a common humanity perspective that everybody who pushes themselves in a training function gets injured at one point or another. If they don't, then they're very lucky or genetically just freaks. And there are people out there, those are sometimes the best people. But everybody gets injured because you're pushing the limit. The thing then to realise is, why have I got injured? What's exactly wrong? And then what's my approach now of rehab? And what can I focus on to work on that's going to make me better overall? And so your rehab should be a combination of strength-based movements that work that particular joint, working with your physical therapist to do that in a progressive manner. You can then work on everything else that isn't injured. Let's give a solid example, right? So, wrist injury. You can work...
Topical for you?
You can work around a wrist injury, right? It's frustrating and you can't flex your wrist, but if you can keep it in a locked position, what can you do with a straight wrist position that still works your upper body? Can you use dumbbells rather than barbells? Can you take out handstand and gymnastic work and work on your shoulder strength? Can you work on your opposite side? There's good research to suggest that, let's say you broke your arm, working on your other side, there's good research to suggest there is a carryover effect. So if you're doing single arm bench press or single arm rows, things like that, there's good research to suggest that it will carry over to the opposite side and maintain muscle function there. And then anything else that you can focus on that isn't injured and you can work on from a strength progression, from a skill progression, there's always going to be loads. I think people get dismayed when they have a class environment, because you can look at a class and go, well, I can't do any of that. But I think it's having the confidence to still go to the class and work with the coach to find alternatives. Even if it's a completely different movement, you're still with the class, you're still exercising, and you're doing a workout and not using it as a reason not to train.
Yeah, absolutely. If just going on what Jonny said there about those injuries, like that's literally what you guys pay for, is to have a coach who can provide you with an alternative exercise, ideally similar stimulus to the one that you can't do, but sometimes not, and something that's going to help you progress as an athlete individually. Going back to the original question, two things like really spring out to me, Jonny, and one of them is Brent Fikowski's massive injury that he had, which then the following season he qualified for the games. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know that story, Brent Fikowski was like a bubble athlete, finished one or two spots away from the games for like 2 years on the pumps, and he was right on the wire. And then he had a back injury, was it?
Something massive, yeah, it was something really big.
Something huge, and it basically meant that he just had to work on upper body strength, upper body pressing strength. That was the only thing he could do. And it filled in a massive hole that he had, because he's a tall limit athlete, isn't he? He's like long, he's got long levers. His pressing, his handstand push-ups, handstand walk, his gymnastics pressing was poor. So he worked on that purely during his period whilst he was injured, and then he come back the following season, hadn't really lost that much leg strength, skills, fitness, whatever you want to call it, but had gained in the areas he was massively deficient in, because he actually spent time on them. And he come back and he I think he won. Did he win the regionals? I think it was 2015 or something.
Oh, right.
And he won the regionals by a mile. And so in that situation, yes, an injury aided Brent Fikowski. I think to answer your question a little bit deeper, I think an injury can aid the athlete's overall progression if the athlete has the correct mindset towards the injury.
Yeah, it's the way you approach it.
Yeah. So the other thing that stands out to me is a book that I read years ago when I was doing the Training Think Tank movement course, which is called The Gift of Injury. And that book, it described all these like major injuries that these powerlifters had and how it actually helped them figure out things that were wrong with their technique.
I was going to say that.
Yeah. So
like, is it an imbalance or is it something
exactly
wrong?
Yeah. So the book said that on average it takes something like 7 catastrophic back injuries to make a world champion deadlifter.
That's so funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
When people would get shit scared of deadlifts after injury their back.
And basically, it told stories of how certain athletes had different technical faults, and they came out eventually in a sadly an injury, which put them out for whatever, a season or 6 months, whatever. But what it taught them was, right, I'm weak here in this position. My lats aren't strong enough. My hamstrings aren't strong enough. My right glute's firing more than my left glute. And basically it rectified lots of issues for them. And in the end, that's what it took to actually make them successful. But, it's roughly 7 catastrophic back injuries to make a world champion deadlifter.
And it's important to think as well, like, in the I want it now generation that we're in with results, that an injury can annoy you because it's like, oh man, I was making great progress, it's going to set me back, like, I was making, I want to be good tomorrow. And you just think, well, if you're training for life, then you want to be doing this for years and years and years. And as you just said there, if an injury is actually because something's not right, or you've got an overuse injury, or there's a weaker muscle group that could be supporting a movement and another one's taken over, analysing that and doing the accessory work on your weaker muscle groups will make you more well-rounded, more bulletproof, and then in the future you'll be stronger. Like we just said about my wrist, that's the second time I've injured that same wrist, and I've had knee tendonitis in the past, I've had a hamstring injury, I had a shoulder and elbow injury after missing a snatch at Strength in Depth in 2017. But going through the physical therapist work, and I've used different people in different things, and I've done, James Jowsey's kind of like red pill stuff. So like I've done thousands and thousands of lunges in my time, but all of that has now progressed to a point where I'm still stronger than ever. and still like 12, 13 years on, I'm still lifting weights.
Yeah.
Like I've not gotten so injured that I've gotten out of the game. So you do need to approach it with that way of how do I get around this,
Yeah.
rather than why has this happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's a process you can go through with the coaches. So if you are an athlete with an injury at the moment, you know, and you're working around things, then discuss this with your coach. Like, what can I work on during this period that's going to make me feel better, move better? What's going to stop me getting injured again? You know, and like Jonny says, sometimes it's the little boring rehab exercises in the corner, you know, that you wouldn't have put time into unless you got the injury.
It's the stuff
that
you don't see on Instagram that actually will pay off.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. I think that was a pretty comprehensive answer. We're going to do a listener question at the start of every podcast. So keep them coming. I'll release the next part of questions for the next episode. So thank you to everyone who answered. Also, thank you to Jack Keelan, who sent quite a few funny questions. Keep them coming as well. Wicked, on to the strength section then, which is our take on a popular fitness concept. And the concept we're going to debunk, demystify today is that you have to smash yourself every time you come into the gym. And there are sort of conflicting bits of information, guidance, advice out there in the fitness industry about this. You know, some people say, you know, if you're not laying on your back at the end of the workout, smash, it's not worth doing. Some people say it's all about intensity and you've got to hammer yourself. Some people say it's the long game, play it easy. You know, where do we start with something like that, Jonny?
I think starting with that, that concept in general of like smashing yourself and the concept of intensity as well, because with, you know, my thoughts on kind of CrossFit HQ aside, that ideology of intensity is the metric of success. You know, like that, the definition is constantly varied, high, you know, functional movements performed at high intensity. And I think the issue with that is that if you think that only intensity drives results, you're going to be in a position where you're always trying to be as intense as possible. And I think it's important to understand that there's a time for intensity and then there's a time for like volume and reps and strength. And intensity is a way to test your fitness. So like a 1 rep max or a 1K row or a 2K row or what have you. Yeah, okay, like if you have an intense block, you're going to peak those things and, you know, hopefully get a PB. But if you're always trying to peak or you're always trying to test, you've actually got no time to train, and you're not training what we just spoke about there in terms of accessory work, strength work. We've got here like RPE, rate of perceived exertion. You need time under tension and volume at lower weights, lower intensities in order to train and get better. And I think if you come in every time to the gym and you think, right, I'm going to smash this workout as hard as possible, I'm going to, you know, lift as heavy as I can, what starts to happen is that as you get to that that crossover between intensity and technique, is that your technique starts to go because you're just trying to lift as heavy as you can, or you're just trying to move as fast as you can. And you'll see this with someone in a workout. Like let's say it's the classic workout Cindy, right? 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 air squats, 20-minute AMRAP. And someone goes, right, I'm gonna try and get a PB here. They'll fly out of the gate, they'll be moving really well, and then as they get tired, their movement starts to deteriorate. As their movement starts to deteriorate, they'll get more tired because they're just leaking energy. They'll get more fatigued because they're moving worse, and therefore their rounds get slower. And you see this kind of curve of like really quick, slow, and then slow death, and then they're out. And if you're testing your time, fair. But if you wanted to use Cindy as a training element, then what you could do instead is, okay, I want to work on moving as well as possible, not leaking energy through movement, and I want to try and go for intra-set repeatability. So I want every round to be as close together time-wise, and then that could be your training element. And you're still working out, you're still getting a great workout, but it's not as intense. And the rate of perceived exertion, I think, for most people, for most training sessions, should be around that like 7 to 8 out of 10. So if you think about a session being 10 out of 10 hard, pull it back to 2 squares in your perceived effort, and you've got a good thing. And that will allow you then to have, if you come into the gym and you're tired, you can go at an RPE 8, and that will be lower than coming in fresh, being at an RPE 8. But at least you're always listening to your body, and you're getting a good training session in, rather than, let's say, coming in tired and then thinking, oh yeah, but it says 80% back squats, I need to do 80. But actually 80% for that day for you would crush you. And then all you do is, you fail a lift, you feel bad, have a terrible day training. Whereas if you took it back, listen to your body more, you'd come in, you'd still get a good training session.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast on this once, and it said sort of something similar to what you just said there with the RPE scale. And then someone asked the question, well, how many times a week should we be going 10 out of 10?
Mm.
And the guy, not calling anyone out, the guy said, once a week maximum, maybe once or twice. And I think that actually should be, that shouldn't be an arbitrary number.
No.
We shouldn't say 1 or 2.
No.
I think it depends on your life and what's going on.
Yeah.
If you're sleeping well, eating well, happy, enjoying your job, fulfilled, rested, you could come in and do that 3 times a week, probably. You could go 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 on, 3 different days. But definitely the other way around. If you're like stressed, you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're feeling tired, you're dragging yourself to the gym, you might well be hitting 5 out of 10s.
Yeah.
Getting something done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it needs to be regulated by you, how you're feeling, and what your appetite for that, intensity is.
Yeah.
So my sort of take on this topic is there's 2 sides to this, and it definitely needs to be balanced.
Yeah.
If you had to smash yourself every time you come in the gym in order to make results, that concept's quite clearly not true, because that would mean if you wanted to like run a marathon really quickly, you'd just go and do 50-minute sprints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As fast as you can at a time.
Hard as you can.
Or you'd just be doing a marathon every day.
Yeah.
Train for a marathon.
Which doesn't work.
No.
Ineffective, right? So that's obviously not true. The concept's clearly not true. The other side is also not true. If you come in and do nothing, go through the motions, super easy, are you going to make progress? You might, but it's going to be very slow.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a battle of like whether you're actually enjoying it, because you're not progressing. If you're not progressing, it takes you forever. You're actually still enjoying your training. I don't know. So I would say you need that middle ground of like, you're not smashing yourself every day, but you are working hard and giving that good intensity, like Jonny said, somewhere around that 7-8 mark regularly. Every now and then you press and go, and you're doing the 10 out of 10 effort, and then, when you need to and when your life depicts it, you can give a 2 out of 10 and still be happy with that. That's what you've got today.
I think that comes down to a good element of self-compassion as well from the person's side. Like you just said there, if you've got, you're not sleeping, let's say you've got 2 young kids, you've got a full-time job, you've got other things going on.
Got one on the way.
Yeah, you've got one on the way. If you're not sleeping very well.
By the way, if anyone's thinking, bloody hell, Max.
No, yeah, it's me. Ali and I expecting in October, so that the sleepless nights haven't started yet. But from Natalie's perspective, energy levels being slightly lower, not sleeping as well, not getting a full night's sleep. She has to show that compassion for herself then, that she's not a full-time athlete, she's not a full-time coach, she's someone who has a full-time job, she's got a business on the side, she's growing another human being. She's going to have those days where she comes in, she's low energy, so it's the best thing for her to scale it back, move, flush some blood, lift some weights, great, and then on a day where she has more energy, she can push the envelope a bit more. As you said there, sometimes you do have to push the envelope to know what your limits are. Because you may have been coming for the last 4 weeks and going too easy on your weight. Like, oh yeah, I'm not sure I can lift that heavy, so I'm just going to do this. And you're doing sets of, let's say it's sets of 5 strict press, and every set of 5, you're finishing it and being like, yeah, cool, I've got loads in the tank. It's like, well, maybe push it and see if you can get to a place where you're only just making that 5th rep, and then bring it back a bit, and then you're like, right, that's my new training weight. And this is where logging your scores and progress is so important, because then on a week by week or month by month basis, you can look at the weights you've lifted. If you're feeling good, you can then go, right, okay, I'm going to start at that weight I did that time, and then see if I can keep the same weight across my sets, or I'll increase if it feels good. Or if you're having a bad day, you're like, okay, I've hit that, but I remember that was a good day for me. Let's see what I can get today. I'm going to be compassionate and know that I've got less energy, and it's still better to do something than nothing.
Yeah, and so my last little piece on this is kind of how our programming as a company or as a brand helps you with this. So there will be certain sessions where, you know, you can't really push to 100%. You can't give a 10 out of 10 RPE based on the skill required in the workout, maybe the weights required in the workout, maybe the movements. Like, for example, if it's super high skill, it's like, let's say double unders, muscle ups and squat snatches, which we rarely program, but let's say it was. Most people would struggle to reach a 10 out of 10 on that workout because they're going to need to rest to hit the muscle ups. They're going to need to rest to hit the snatches well. They're going to need to rest because else they'll trip on the double unders, right? So some of these days will be auto-regulated for you by the programming. You won't be able to give a 10 out of 10. Other days, it might be running and burpee box jump overs. I mean, that is a clear green sign of like, you can graft in this one if you want it.
Yeah.
And so the programming also plays a role when it comes to that sort of, you can't smash yourself in certain workouts at the end of the day.
No, and you can see that in the breathe cycle when you have things like nasal breathing on a conditioning piece. Like that is a constraint that's put on you on purpose to bring your intensity down.
Yeah.
And that is because we have the data for aerobic conditioning at the percentage of intensity that should be done at for the best results. And you've got to think then of the adaptation of the training. So your programming does that naturally, and I'd say as well, like, you know, listen to the coaches when they give their briefing on the warm-up and in the workout in general, right? You know, we want you to smash this one, we want you to go all out, or, okay, we want you to take it back a bit, we want you to focus on your technique, we want you to focus on your movement. As you said, if it's full snatches and double unders and muscle ups, you can't smash yourself because then you're not getting a muscle up, you're not getting a double under. You need to take it back, focus on your movement quality, and then that's a training session. Because think about it, right? If you do an EMOM of muscle ups, you want to have a rep where, okay, I can get the rep done, I can recover, and I can get the rep done again. And each rep looks as good as the last one, and you've got then more volume. Because let's say you do a 10-minute EMOM of 1 rep, you've got 10 reps there. Whereas if you just try to do 10 reps of time, and you've got 3, you go home with 3 muscle ups and
failed the fourth.
And the fourth one you failed. You failed
Grinded
the
out
one.
the fifth
The
one.
third one was an awful like chicken wing. And then you tweaked your rotator cuff and you're like, ooh, that wasn't a good session.
Yeah.
So you've got to realise like skill versus strength versus intensity versus aerobic conditioning, and what's the purpose of today? How should I be feeling?
Yeah. Cool. So that is our strength section, guys. If you would like us to give our take on a popular fitness concept, then feel free to message the Instagram with your suggestions. We've got a few lined up.
Not you, Jack Keelan.
Not Jack Keelan, you're banned. Okay, on to our workout now, guys, which is all about lift anxiety. So it's something that a few of our members, well, let's say more than a few, quite a lot of our members are struggling with at the moment. So hoping this podcast gives you a little bit of a framework to help you work through that problem. So when I'm talking about lift anxiety, I mean, I've called it lift anxiety, but it could be anything anxiety. It could be goal anxiety, where basically you have a goal that you try and hit. Let's say, you know, Jonny recently hit a 120 snatch. Let's call it hitting a 120 snatch. Or let's say, for example, you're trying to get your first bar muscle up. It's these big goal achievements that sometimes people struggle with. And, you know, me and Jack were discussing it this week about how sometimes we get members in and we go through all the drills and we do all the practice and they move perfectly, and then we remove whatever it is, the band that was helping them, and we know that they can get one, and we say, right, go on, go for that muscle up, and everything changes. It all goes to pot. They forget the drills they've just done 10 seconds ago, and all of that is just down to mindset, anxiety, and basically trying too hard and not just letting things happen. So what is the framework to deal with that? I've broken this down into 3 phases. The first phase is pre the event. And the best way for you to deal with lift anxiety or goal anxiety pre-event is to build proof or evidence that you can do X. This comes from, it's been shouted a lot recently on podcast channels, is this whole, this stack of undeniable evidence that you are the person that you say you are. So what this means is picking your goal, let's say it's a 120 snatch. Okay, there'll be certain things that you need to do before you attempt that 120 snatch that make you believe that you can hit that 120 snatch. Now, they'll be different for each person. It might be you need to hit a triple at 112. It might be that you need to overhead squat 130. It might be that you need to high pull 120. It might be that you need to snatch balance 120. whatever. Let's say you write a list of 3, 5, 7 of those little tasks. Let's build that proof before you actually get to that 120 snatch that you can do it. Same applies for a muscle up. It might be that you need to do a chest to bar pull up. It might be that you need to get your hips to touch the bar. It might be that you need to do 7 reps on a band, okay, a purple band. You need to be able to do 2 reps on a red band, whatever. You need to tick all those boxes so that, as best you can, so that when you get to the event, you go in, I am the type of person who can do this muscle up. I am the type of person who can do this 120 snatch. And what goes with that is you can't fake it, can you, Jonny? You can't fake, like, as soon as you believe that you can't do something, you won't do it.
You've lost it. You've lost it. If you approach it with like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. That,
you won't do it.
just even if 10% of your body's going, I'm not going to get this 120 snatch, you ain't going to get it.
No.
So you need that concrete belief and then work backwards from problems, So, let's say it is that, let's say you want to clean and jerk 100 kilos, yeah? Work backwards. What in your head makes you believe that you can actually do that? And then set after those individual tasks, and I won't break down it anymore. The next is during the event. So you're doing your PT with Jack, you're doing your open gym session during the day, and you've got that written on your program, 1 RM snatch, or you've got Jack saying, let's go for that muscle up. What do you do during the event? This is where I'm going to use that really overused and corny phrase, which is you need to focus on the process and not the outcome. And what I would change that to make it even clearer is focus on your effort and not the result. So a lot of people in this situation, they'll go like, I really want that muscle up. And they focus on like, I want to get it. I want to get that muscle up. I want to get that 120 snatch. And they visualize themselves either hitting it or not hitting it. And when actually what I think they should do is try and stay in the moment a little bit more by pinpointing the exact moment that they need to focus on. So let's say it's the muscle up, maybe it's the catch, maybe it's the hip drive towards the bar, whatever. Let's visualize and focus on that and focus on effort. Because when you focus on effort, okay, it removes the result. You can't control the result. You might hit it, you might not, okay? But if you try, you can be proud of yourself either way. And then that removes that like negative feeling if you don't get it. For example, in a snatch, something that I focus on massively is just fight in the bottom. I hate it when the bar just like lands on me and then I lose it forward, right? I'll give it everything I can to hold on, and I focus on that before I go into the lift. I'm focusing on that in my mindset. Like, as long as I give effort in that catch position, I'm happy, I'm proud. Whether I hit it or not, I don't care. What I care about is if I try. And that helps me with things. I think people pinpoint the moment that you're going to struggle with, focus on that moment, and then give it effort in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point there to know where you might be missing that lift. If it is an Olympic lift, as you just said there, like for you, it's personally the bottom position.
Yeah.
And that being your weakness. As you said, like if you can build proof that you can do stuff through certain different things. Sorry about that. I thought I put my phone on airplane mode. If you can, and it is on airplane mode, that's interesting. So if you can focus on, building that proof with different movements, that's really important. Focusing on the feel is something that I think isn't spoken about enough, because with something like a muscle up or a snatch, which seems to be the two things we're focusing on, you could also say a double up there. Let's talk about like the more complex things within CrossFit, but this could be your power clean, this could be your even single unders, whatever you're struggling with from a coordination perspective. It's focusing on how the movement feels rather than trying to focus on all of the different cues. So a clean or a snatch or a muscle up, you could say, oh yeah, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. You've got 10 cues to focus on. Whereas actually, when you're doing the warm-up exercises that you do in a class or with a coach, the progressions, you need to lock down how that progression feels to do, rather than thinking about it logically. So rather than, let's say it's a snatch high pull, rather than thinking, right, okay, I need to deadlift it to my knee and then start to bring my hip through, and then I come up onto my toes and then I high pull with my elbows. It's like, do it slowly once, focusing on that, and then remember how that felt for your body to move through that motion. How did it feel in your hamstrings? How did it feel in your hips to extend in that manner? How did it feel in your elbows? And then be like, right, I need to recreate that feeling. Your body learns through feeling. It's a very kinesthetic piece. rather than logical thought. And it's the logical thought that blocks people. When you said, we know that they can do it, and then we say, right, go and do it, and then they stop, they block themselves, because it's the logical thought going, oh, I need to remember all of those things that he said, or like, oh, yeah, but I'm not sure that I can do it. And I'm not, you know, I can totally understand why, because that's exactly where I've been before as well. But you need to focus on how the movement feels. And that's why progressions are so important. You know, that's why snatch high pulls and overhead squats and snatch balances and snatch pull unders and kip swings and hip to bar kips and glide kips and, you know, scat pull-ups and all those things are so important, because it's teaching you the feeling. And then it's like, right, let's recreate that feeling. Do a banded muscle up and then take the band away and try to do the same thing from a feeling perspective. That would be my best advice.
Lovely. And then finally, guys, kind of post-event. So you've gone into the session and either you've performed the goal, you've got that muscle up, you've got that snatch, or you haven't. My advice post-event is to leave on a win and never a loss. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical win. Because it's easier said than done, right? You know, just actually making the goal. It just has to be a mental win. So, and I'll use some examples to try and explain this concept. So, an example would be Jack is really good at this. Jack Turner. He'll, for example, snatch. You know, say his goal is to snatch 125 in a session. He'll snatch 120 and maybe he'll miss 125, but he'll go back and go, well, I snatched 120 and I was wearing shoes, not Olympic lifters. So I'll definitely hit 125. So even though the session is a loss because he hasn't hit his 125, which he wanted, he makes a win out of it by saying, next time when I'm in lifters, I'll definitely hit it. That can also happen on a negative concept as well. And let's use someone else for this example. I don't know, maybe someone like Tara, who in the past has been guilty of, she'll do 10 beautiful snatch repetitions at, 50 plus kilos. And she'll go up to her PB weight, and miss it once. And she'll go, oh, I missed my weight. Session was rubbish. And she'll forget the 10 previous beautiful reps that she's done and focus on that one negative. And obviously it's something we're trying to work on with Dara at the moment, and she is getting better at it. But we need to try and take wins out of the session. What did you do well? And what can you focus on as a win? The other thing you can do is actually take a win out of the session, right? So let's say, for example, you go in and your clean's feeling awful. You're supposed to PB, you're supposed to hit 100 kilo clean, but you're struggling at 90. Why don't we go in, switch the goal a little bit? Can our high hand clean 80 and take that as a win for the day? Can I front squat 110 and take that as the win? Like, can I still work towards the goal and go, yeah, you know what, the clean weren't great, but I did actually make some progress today.
Yeah, and I think the important thing there, Max, as well, right, is that there's 2 points here. We can focus on feel rather than logic, again, in terms of the weight that we're lifting. And that's a big anxiety piece for a lot of people, is like, oh yeah, but that's my PB. And you're like, yeah, but you just did 10 reps at 5 kilos below that. And it's like, and every one of those looked smooth.
Yeah.
So rather than focusing on the next weight you're lifting, why don't you just focus on how it feels? And it's hard when you're adding the weight to the bar because you're mentally adding that up. Like, a nice thing is to just, go to the States, use pounds, and just go by feel. Because, rather than converting the pounds to kilos, just lift a weight, go by feel, and see what happens. Convert it when you're done. And that was a big piece for me when I went to the States and, PB'd my front squat, because I wasn't paying attention to what I was lifting. I was paying attention to how it felt, and I was having confidence with my movement and how I was lifting. And that's now how I approach every lifting session. You've also got that point I made earlier about the difference between testing and training. If you and I, Max, came in and we were like, right, let's sling some tin, let's do Olympic total, we'll do 1 rep max snatch, 1 rep max clean and jerk. Well, we'd probably be building weight every rep. We'd start with pretty, low volume of reps, like maybe a set of 5, like an empty barbell, do a warm up and that kind of thing. And we'd be down to singles pretty quickly, because we'd be conserving energy, we'd be just lifting weight, we'd be going every 90 seconds to 2 minutes to stay engaged and, pumped. But we'd be trying to raise weight every set, wouldn't we? As long as we were hitting it.
Yeah.
That's testing. Training is different. You shouldn't be coming in and going, right, let's test my clean and jerk every week or every third day. You should be coming in and going, right, I'm going to warm up to about 8 out of 10 hard or 80%, and then I'm going to do 5 sets of 2 at that weight. And then next week, you're going to do 5 sets of 2 again, and you're going to go slightly heavier. And then you're going to go slightly heavier the next week, slightly heavier the next week. And then before you know it, you're doing doubles at what was your old 1 rep max. Now you've got proof that you can PB. And it goes back to that very point that you made at the start of this workout section. You've built proof that you can do it. And that's training, which is different to testing. And that's why blocks of training are usually 8 weeks long, because you have that amount of time to progress.
Yeah, and if you're in training mode, everything becomes a win, right?
Exactly.
So like you're training to achieve 100 kilo clean. If you're 3 reps at 92, 2 reps at 95, and 1 at 97,
Massive.
but missed 100, you're still a win because you've hit.
Look at all the volume
7
which is
reps
done.
above
Yeah.
90%.
Yeah.
But if you're in testing mode when you come in, the session's a loss.
Well, you might spend a short amount of time building up to the weight, and then let's say you have 5 misses at your PB, and then you're like, oh, crap
I
session.
haven't actually hit anything.
You haven't actually built any volume
Yeah.
doing anything, and
Yeah.
all you've done is taught your body from a feeling perspective
That you
how
can't
to
do.
miss.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the important thing as well, is that what we just spoke about in RPE in terms of, are you moving well? You are better off coming in and hitting that threshold between technique and intensity, dropping it back to where your technique is smooth and building volume there. And then at the next week, raising the weight slightly and seeing if you can still hit that perfect technique. Is the same thing I talked about in Muscle Up, EMOMs, skill-based EMOMs. You are better off learning a skill, building volume at that skill with no intensity, and then raising the intensity slightly at a lower volume, and then raise the volume, drop the intensity, then increase the intensity, raise the volume, drop the intensity, increase intensity. That is the skill ladder progression.
And all that does is just build that proof that you can do the task. Cool, guys. So yeah, just in terms of a recap there, if you're struggling with lift anxiety or performance anxiety or goal anxiety, whatever you want to call it, pre-events, build proof that you can do the task in your training. During events, focus on your effort and not the result. Pinpoint and visualize the moment at which you need to give effort. Focus on your feel, and not necessarily what you need to do to achieve the task. Focus on how it feels. And then post-event, leave the session on a win, a mental win. Never leave the session on a loss.
Thank you for listening to the ShireFit podcast with Max and Jonny. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week for another episode.